Is the 49ers offensive line good enough? Have they done enough to get them over the hump and potentially win that sixth Lombardi? All that and more in this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way. From offseason to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Time to talk about the 49ers offensive line like it hasn't been a big topic the entire off season. Basically, since the Super Bowl, people have been talking about this 49ers offensive line and how it just isn't good enough to be able to get you over the hump and win that Super Bowl. And it made a lot of people go a little on the over the top side and say, hey, we need to draft nothing but offensive linemen. And of course, there's some that are just saying, hey, we need to get better at the position. I think that is always the case. You want to get better at every single position, but the offensive line is definitely forefront. The 49ers need to continue to improve on that 49ers offensive line because they've now got a franchise quarterback in Brock Purdy. They've got to make sure they protect him. He's got the ability to get the ball to the weapons that he has, and there's an absolute plethora of weapons when you're just looking at the skill players, not to mention he's got the offensive player of the year sitting behind him every single play in Christian McCaffrey. So the 49ers offensive line, though it has been a key conversation, this is one of those questions that's hard to understand and hard to figure out the answer to because we've heard Coach Chris Foerster come out now and say that if he has the choice, he's going to choose the skill player over the offensive line. And that's very interesting. He did, however, say that, there's a certain level that there has to be. Like, you have to stay just above that level. If you don't, you're in a world of hurt. So now that we know what Chris Foerster is saying, we can kind of look back at the 49ers 2023 production along the offensive line, but also kind of start looking forward to what advantages they could have compared to last year, what things could change, and whether by the end of this episode, whether they're just good enough to win the Super Bowl, because I don't think anyone believes this is the greatest offensive line ever assembled, or this is an offensive line that you can completely ride their backs all the way to the end zone. We're looking for a offensive line that's good enough, an offensive line that can get you there and do enough to help your playmakers win. That's the ultimate name of the game. And when you're looking at building rosters, you have to figure out somewhere where you're going to skimp a little bit. Now, the 49ers have paid Trent Williams a ton of money, but really everyone else along the offensive line is paid very modestly. Most of them are on their rookie deals, or in Jake Brendel and Colt McKivit's case, very cheap contracts. Same with John Feliciano on his one-year deal. So 49ers haven't spent a lot of money at the position recently. When Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch first came to town, they spent money handsomely when it came to the center position, whether that was bringing in Weston Richburg or eventually bringing in Alex Mack. They weren't afraid. Then they trade for Trent Williams and they pay him to make him the highest paid offensive tackle. So they have been willing to pay some money within the offensive line, but have they done enough now? Did they spend enough money and combine that with draft picks to get the offensive line that's going to take them where they need to go? Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining this conversation. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use our promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, the game starts here. And for me, the game a lot of times starts with the trenches and starts with the offensive line. I played offensive line growing up, and then when I got into coaching, the first position I coached was offensive line. It was what I knew the best. And so I am very in tune with offensive line, and I love talking offensive line. I don't know how many people really like talking about it except for maybe complaining about it, but offensive line is a very thankless position. When you do well, everyone expects you to do well. That's your job. When you do bad, it's highlighted on every single media outlet because usually when you do bad, a running back gets blown up or a quarterback gets sacked for a loss. So there's a huge highlight on these players, and really it's a tough job. You're going against different players, different matchups, different skill sets every single week, and you're right there body to body physically competing with these guys, and you just have to be better than they are. But there is an expectation that comes with playing offensive line. You have to do it well. I would say in the league right now, it's tougher and tougher to find good offensive linemen. A lot of the key athletes that play line spots play defensive line. And so offensive line is kind of becoming a little bit of a lost art. You can't find as many guys that are as elite as you used to be able to find. So with the league changing and the athleticism among both offensive and defensive line, so have some of the skill sets changed. And the 49ers, though they're building their team with players that they feel can help them, have had to manipulate their players to fit their scheme. So first off, not all players along the offensive line are going to fit the scheme that you run. You have to make sure you locate those guys. And then how does one take away from the other? And what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, if you're running a zone scheme like the 49ers run, it's very much predicated on finding athletic offensive linemen that can get to the second level. Second level being linebackers, being a nickel corner, getting up to that level and being able to block them is important. That's how you go from making a play that has a significant gain or no gain to having a play that has a big gain. And we know Kyle Shanahan has said this before. He designs every single play to potentially end up in touchdown. He's not designing plays that gain 3 or 5. He wants the whole enchilada every single time he calls a play. But you have to have the athleticism to be able to get to the second level. So that starts cutting down on the kinds of players that you can get. Now, we know that Trent Williams is one of those elite players. I mean, he's just different than everybody else because he's the size of a guy that can handle any single offensive scheme, but has the athleticism to play within the 49ers scheme. When you look at a guy like Jake Brendel, he's the prototypical size type guy normally for a Kyle Shanahan scheme because athleticism, he can get where he needs to go. But with Trent Williams being the unicorn, Jake Brendel being the norm, you kind of start figuring out that what are the things that Jake Brendel's going to struggle at? Well, first off, he's going to be good at getting from point A to point B, but he's probably going to struggle holding that block, number one, because he's not as strong, he's not as big, he's not as physical. And then number two, he's going to anchor very badly when it comes to pass blocking. And that has been the case. Jake Brendel, not the best pass blocking center, and then he just can't hold those blocks. So you have this part where you're looking for certain players, and we've seen the 49ers go in and out of the mold of what they're going to do. They draft Aaron Banks. It shocks everyone. Coach Chris Foerster admits probably not the normal fit. Once again, another big guy like Trent Williams, who they think has enough athletic ability to do it. But what are they expecting from him? To be better when it comes to anchoring in pass defense or in pass rush sets. And he does. So giving that body size helps you when it comes to pass rush, but he's not as good when it comes to run blocking. So you have a give and take when it comes to the 49ers offensive line, and they've been trying to figure out exactly how to find the guys that fit pass blocking and the guys that fit run blocking. Now, what do we know about the 49ers offensive philosophy that Kyle Shanahan likes to implement? Number one, it is a run-first offense. And a lot of that could be attributed to the fact that he hasn't really had a quarterback that can consistently win over and over and over. But it still has been his norm in San Francisco. He wants to get the ball to Christian McCaffrey. He wants to tie that into the passing game and have play action passes off of that. And the truth is, Brock Purdy's better with play action passes. 133% rate in play action passes compared to 100 in straight dropbacks. The offense is more effective when it's a run first offense because then it sets up play action passes and explosive plays downfield. So how do you find that give and take of finding the offensive linemen that fit and then are still able to do all things you want? That has been the 49ers' struggle. And with Coach Chris Foerster's philosophy that, hey, let's get a skill player over the offensive line guys, because the offensive line, we can find guys between round 2 and 5 that can start, is really the philosophy that makes this thing hinge on a very difficult decision on who's going to get to play. So let's just look at the 49ers offensive line and kind of how they had a season last year. And we know Trent Williams was so good. Trent Williams really is just Trent. And I think that people, if they're being critical, could say Trent Williams 2023 wasn't as good as 2022. But I think that, Trent Williams is still the best to do it in the NFL. So let's remember that. I think one of the big people that comes up in conversation the most has got to be Colton McKivitz, not Trent Williams. And McKivitz had the 15th most blown blocks of all linemen in the NFL last year. 15th most. That's not good. And what's interesting about Colton McKivitz is that was the big outcry from the fan base. Let's draft an offensive tackle to take over Colton McKivitz's spot. Now, the problem was at where the 49ers were picking at 31, you weren't going to get an offensive tackle that could probably step in year 1 and start. But the argument was, let's bring in an offensive tackle to compete, and maybe by year 2, he's ready to go. And that's a good philosophy. That definitely is something you could do. Of course, what did the 49ers do? They went with Coach Chris Foerster's philosophy. Why get this guy when you can get Ricky Pearsall, who can take the ball and score a touchdown? Because what did Coach Chris Foerster say? Okay, your right tackle you literally said right tackle made a fantastic block, and your receiver got tackled after 5 yards. Great play. Now your right tackle missed the block, which Colton McKivitz missed the 15th most in the NFL, but you got the ball to Debo, and he takes it to the house for a 60-yard touchdown. Which one do you want? That is the philosophy. And you're looking at Colton McKivitz, and they signed him to an extension, and he missed the 15th most blocks last year. McKivitz had over 30 missed blocks this season. The next closest lineman to him on the 49ers had just over 20. So there is a huge difference between what Colton McKivitz is doing as far as missed blocks compared to the rest of the team. Now, he's going to draw tough assignments because Colton McKivitz playing the right side, and if you're an edge defender, you don't want to go against Trent Williams. You want to go against Colton McKivitz. That's the easiest rate. And Colton McKivitz had some games this year where he really struggled, especially in pass protection, where he gave up 3 sacks to TJ Watt in week 1 in his first start of the season. And we knew that was going to be tough. That's a tough matchup for Colton McKivitz overall. But also in the Ravens game, he struggled in that matchup, giving up a couple sacks. He gave up 10 sacks on the season. The good news is when he got to the playoffs, he slowed all that down and he got a lot better when it came to pass protection. We got to give credit to Colton McKivitz for that. But it was a tough year for Colton McKivitz. And so one of the ways that you can adjust and think about how good and gauge how good an offensive line is playing is adjusted line yards. And the 49ers offensive line and how many yards they're responsible for on each carry. So that's always a good number. It's adjusted line yards. They're going to figure out how many yards the offensive line actually accounts for creating for your running back, not just what your running back gets, right? You look at Detroit back in the 90s, and you've got Barry Sanders bouncing off 3 guys in the backfield and running for 20 yards. Well, the offensive line didn't do anything to help him get those 20 yards. So now they have stats like this. So now you can gauge how good they are when it comes to run blocking. And we know the 49ers run blockers and run blocking is what they want to do because they're a run-first team. And the 49ers ranked 4th. So the 49ers offensive line, as far as makeup and the way that Kyle Shanahan designed it, they want guys that can block in the run game really good, and they've got that. The fact that they're 4th with Christian McCaffrey means, yeah, McCaffrey's doing all the stuff that he's supposed to do, but the 49ers offensive line is taking care of business there. So with them ranking fourth when it comes to run blocking, that's superb. That's an area where the 49ers are good enough. Now, that's not going to mean they're good enough overall. We're going to get to that. But they are good enough potentially when it comes to running game. Because when you look at the 49ers as run blockers, Kittle, of course, was absolutely fantastic. He just doesn't miss blocks. But he's not an offensive lineman. I know he stays in a lot, but he was fantastic. But how about this when it comes to the run game? Colton McKivitz was one of the best in the NFL as far as missing blocks in the run game. Now, we talked about some struggles when it comes to pass blocking, but when it came to run blocking, which was supposed to be a weakness for Colton McKivitz when he was drafted, he's doing superb. One of the top in the league. When you look at Jake Brendel, he's one of the worst. More than double missed blocks in the run game compared to Colton McKivitz. So that's what the 49ers are weighing. And we're talking about a run-first team. So Colton McKivitz really good at not missing blocks. So probably the reason he got an extension. They're probably hoping they're going to get more of the Colton McKivitz pass blocking that we got in the playoffs compared to what we got during the regular season, that maybe he improved in those games that he got to start. 20 starts for Colton McKivitz in 2023. The run blocking, he was more superb than he's been. Pass blocking, that's another story. Then Jake Brendel missed a lot of blocks, and this is the biggest concern. When people bring up Jake Brendel and him missing blocks, yes, this is a huge concern. He gets there, but he's not able to hold on to blocks, which means McCaffrey could have a play of 8 yards, and he's only going to get 3. And there's plays where he gets stopped in the hole because Brendel's not able to get where he's supposed to get and make that block, and now he's dealing with knee tendonitis. I think that is a concern for the 49ers when you're looking at run blocking. From a percentage standpoint, McKivitz is 22nd overall when it comes to run blocking. That's really good. I'm a little surprised. I'll be honest. When I was getting into these numbers, I was really surprised that Colton McKivitz was as effective as far as run blocking compared to the other players on the football team. But he did a really good job. 22nd best in the league. That's fine work from Colton McKivitz. You've got a lot of tackles, 64 tackles, and he's 22. That's the kind of thing that gets you an extension, especially if the team is run first. So we're continuing to build on this 49ers rushing offense and the offensive line. Spencer Burford, Aaron Banks, and Trent Williams all had blown block rates between 1.7 and 1.8%. So when it comes to run blocking, Banks, who did a pretty good job. Now, I think the injuries definitely hurt him a lot in his overall production, but really, really good as far as run blocking and that big body being able to do what he's supposed to do. So that's good. No blown blocks for him when it comes to the run game, or a very minuscule amount. And Spencer Burford, who's catching a lot of heat, especially after what happened in the Super Bowl, does a good job run blocking. And I think that is something we knew about him when he came out of college, that he does a very good job when it comes to run blocking. And just so everyone knows, anything under 2.2% is elite. So you've got these guys, Colton McKivitz, Spencer Burford, Aaron Banks, and Trent Williams, run blocking extremely well. And we brought up the point that when you look at the offense, the offensive line and that adjusted rate of yards is 4th best. So it tracks. This 49ers offensive line is very good at run blocking. And I think when you look at McCaffrey and what he was able to do, and even when Elijah Mitchell or Jordan Mason was in, you saw them handling business when it came to the running game. Now, they're not just running over everyone because this is the NFL and teams are going to come in and play you tough, but they did a very good job. And then you look at John Feliciano, and John Feliciano had an 85.4 PFF run blocking grade, 4th highest among all guards in the NFL. So that's good. Now, Jake Brendel, 72.8 PFF run blocking grade, top 15 at the center position. That's why the 49ers have the 5 they have. So when it comes to run blocking, the 49ers offensive line is good enough. In fact, just from these stats, they're 6 deep because you're including Burford in with the starters. Run blocking, very good. The problem is pass blocking. Pass blocking is one of the toughest things for the 49ers because Brock Purdy is under pressure 39% of snaps where they're throwing the football. 39%. That's not good at all. And that is a real problem for the 49ers is that point right there. Purdy is constantly under pressure. So that is the 21st is an adjusted sack rate. That means, there's a lot of times he should be sacked and he's getting away because the 49ers didn't give up a ton of sacks. Brock Purdy sacked, one of the least amount in the entire NFL. But when you look at the times he should have been sacked, but he got away from it, and I think we saw it a lot during the playoffs and Super Bowl, you definitely saw that as a weakness of this football team. And the truth is, all these guys struggle when it comes to pass blocking as long as they're not named Trent Williams. Trent Williams is one of the best. Now let's talk about pass protection. Banks was doing really well during the front part of the season. He was one of the better ones when it came to the pass blocking miss block rate. So he was only having 2% miss blocks when it came to pass rush. Trent Williams was at 2.1%. So you have an idea. Brendel and Burford were at 2.4 and 2.5, which is below average. So that's how close it is, right? You have Coach Chris Foerster talking about that. Where is that level of good enough to not good enough? Well, you see it. Banks was at 2%. Trent Williams at 2.1%. Those are pretty close to the average of what you have to do. Brendel and Burford, 2.4 and 2.5% below average. So 49ers run blocking, you look at those guys, above average. Pass blocking, below average. And we're seeing a little bit of a transition for the 49ers offensive line going from some of these guys that they're bringing in now. Look at Dominic Pooney. What did he do so much in college? Pass blocking. What's the big conversation? He doesn't give up sacks. It doesn't matter where he's at. It doesn't matter if he's in high school, if he's the next level in college, or if he's at Kansas. He's not missing blocks when it comes to pass blocking. What did they say? Coach Chris Foerster said he's going to have to get better run blocking. So the 49ers knew they have a problem when it comes to pass blocking and pass blocking effectively. They've had an emphasis on run blocking. Now they have to try to figure out, and they're trying to find the guys that can do both. They're hoping a guy like Spencer Burford could do both, that he was a guy that was going to be good in the run block, but they could get him a little bit better in pass blocking by moving him inside the guard. Now they've got Dominic Pooney, who's good at pass blocking, and you watch the Senior Bowl practice film, it's fantastic. But now we got to get him up to speed on run blocking. That's a little bit different change of philosophy, isn't it? Now that we got a franchise quarterback, hey, let's get that guy that can pass block consistently, and we'll work on the run blocking. But this 49ers team is still going to be run block first. So that's something that's interesting. Now, this one is going to absolutely put a nail in the coffin of the 49ers' attention to run over pass blocking. Colton McKivitz had a 4% rate of missed blocks on pass snaps. That's 172nd out of 187 linemen. That's not good. Where he was so good on one side, he's so bad on the other. It is extremely tough to see that happen. And that's why so many people were calling for Colton McKivitz, to potentially be replaced. And Colton McKivitz had a 65.3 PFF grade this season. Just for reference, Jake Brendel was 66.7. We talked about John Feliciano being 82.5. Spencer Burford, 50.4. Just struggled, especially in his pass rush reps on the inside. And Banks had slipped all the way down to a 54.9 by the end of the season. Dealing with the turf toe injury, dealing with the shoulder, it caught up. But when you're looking at what the 49ers do, you can definitely tell run blocking, this is one of the most effective offensive lines. When you're looking at pass blocking, it's one of the ineffective natures that they have. So is it good enough is one of the most complicated things to try to figure out. Because I think when you look at Trent Williams, you have to leave him as an outlier, and you got these four guys, potentially five if you talk about Spencer Burford too. But We know the 49ers are going with the new philosophy with the young guys, but how quickly are the young guys going to be able to help? Pooney, good pass blocker. Jarrett Kingston, good pass blocker. So that's what he did so much at Washington State before he went to USC. Both those guys, developmental run guys. So the 49ers are somewhat trying to interject a different mold because they see that there's a little bit of a weakness when it comes to run game to pass game. And maybe not little is a way to describe it. So they're trying to get better at the position. Did they do enough? How much does continuity play into it? Now, we know John Feliciano helped this offensive line immensely. So this 49ers offensive line has been ranked 14th to 20th by preseason polls and preseason looks. 14 to 20th. You got to be on the other side of 15. You've got to be in the top half to be able to be one of the top teams in the league. Now, the 49ers are hoping continuity is going to get it done. John Feliciano stepping in at guard would help. Do they have a competition at center? With John Feliciano doing so well last year, do they have a competition between Feliciano and Brendel? I don't know. But I do know right now, just going off the numbers from last year, our best starting five includes Jake Brendel. Now, should the 49ers go and find another guy? Started hearing conversations about Connor Williams. Hey, should we bring him in? The truth is, Connor Williams is a very good center. Played in a similar scheme in Miami. He could step in right now and play it. But he's coming off an ACL. Are you wanting to bet that this guy's going to step up and be able to play those snaps? But I think the 49ers have a conundrum here. Did they do enough? Is continuity enough to keep you just over the line? Well, we know they added another skilled player. In fact, they added a few more skilled players. Logan Thomas at tight end. They added Jacob Cowing and Ricky Pearsall. So it looks like they're going with the method that Colt McKivitz, you can miss a block over here on the right, but if I get the ball to one of those skill players, you're going to make a big play. So this question has been confounding. Did they do enough? Is the 49ers O-line good enough? I'll say this. One thing I know about the 49ers offensive line is they are good enough to win in the regular season. They are good enough to win in the playoffs. Question is, are they good enough to win the Super Bowl? Because in 2019, the offensive line was definitely struggling at the end of the game because when the game came down to you having to throw the football to win and you couldn't count on that running game, they were overwhelmed by pass rush and by blitz of the Kansas City Chiefs. Fast forward to 2023. Similar situation. And once again, overwhelmed, whether that is by confusion or just by the fact that the blitz was getting home, they were overwhelmed. And what can they do to fix that? I don't know. So the thing is, the 49ers offensive line we know is good enough to get you to the Super Bowl. But it's going to be a wait and see to see if they're good enough to get you over the hump, and win that Super Bowl title. Maybe they did enough with athletes, with skill players, to make it so this offensive line doesn't have to do enough or do more. Maybe young players are going to step up. Maybe a wild card like Spencer Burford is going to become a star player in year 2. He's going to make a big stride. Maybe Colt McKivitz is going to get better in his second year as a starter. I think that's what Chris Forster and Kyle Shanahan are betting on. One guarantee, 49ers offensive line is going to run block well. What are they going to do when it comes to pass blocking? Well, I sure as hope heck they run block good. Because if you run block good and you establish that running game, you can run play action, and that will slow down the pass rush. But they have an Achilles heel. When they get into crunch time and the game is on the line, can they stop from being overwhelmed? If they can, then they're good enough. If they cannot, and they have to play ahead, then they won't be good enough. It's going to be answered on the field. It's not going to be answered right now. But did they make wholesale changes to this offensive line? No. Did they bring in guys that maybe are ushering in a different philosophy where they're now going to teach run blocking over pass blocking? As far as like, that's going to be the thing they got to get better at. They're good pass blockers. Now they get, yes. So they're infiltrating two different philosophies. Run block first, pass block first. going to be interesting to see how it works out. I'm curious to see the Spencer Burford, Dominic Pooney matchup in training camp. I'm curious to see what they do with Feliciano and Jake Brendel. And who knows, maybe a Connor Williams will be somebody the 49ers could be interested in. Thanks for joining me for the episode. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. And if you're listening audio platform 49ers Cutback on Believe, thanks so much for listening. This episode brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, stay safe. And remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.